you know, I would, again, not blame the system, but Joe put up a thing about where we shop. I don't want to talk all the time. You talk.
I'm not certain what you're talking.
Well, basically,
point you're making.
Grocery store near us, nobody wearing a mask. Which, by the way, I think they've just changed. But nobody was wearing a mask. Certainly not the customers, not the staff, not anybody. I even put that up. I said, Franklin County's got a low rate, but I'm going into St. Louis County, which has a higher rate because their people are taking it seriously and everybody's wearing a mask. Now, it's not that all grocery stores were bad and dangerous, but we have one grocery store that is doing the right thing and one that isn't. And part of that, again, we tend to generalize way too much. One bad experience means you've had a bad experience. I wouldn't necessarily go back to that particular place again, but that doesn't mean the whole world is messed up.
And I agree with you, but my point is because I think that's the way many people are looking at it. Our lives are continuing on as this whole pandemic progresses, okay? And some people are busier than others. I think some people are taking, I don't want to say they're not taking it seriously, but they're just going to say, look, I'll throw caution to the wind. If I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't, which, and to be fair, until we have herd immunity or find a vaccine, people are going to be getting this virus. Am I right?
Yes, and what's kind of the major frustration of all of this is, of course, the danger is now worse now than it was when we were in the lockdown.
How so? Explain that, please.
The infection rate is so much higher.
But again, is the infection rate higher because we're testing more? Because the death rate,
well,
because the death rate peaked in April. I mean, less people have died now than in April.
And one explanation for that is the most vulnerable have already succumbed.
I don't think that's a bad theory.
But yes, there's more testing, but the first case in the world was again back in November. There wasn't COVID everywhere, and we didn't know it because of no testing. The numbers are going up because it is spreading. And but it's sort of like in the beginning, and this was true, it's not true anymore, the danger from COVID-19 was not as bad as driving an automobile. But people were screaming lockdown and everything else and in order to stop, but no one's saying ban the automobile. Well, we've gotten used to it. And so people don't feel as threatened. But quite frankly, right now, we're reaching the point where pretty soon everybody's going to know someone who has had or is infected currently because we're hitting 1% of the population now. Mm-hmm. And it's going to keep going up. And people ask me, what's it going to take for Americans to take it seriously? And quite frankly, that's what I said, is they got to know somebody.
Maybe not only know somebody that has the coronavirus, but know somebody that maybe died from the coronavirus,
which,
unfortunately.
I do. But at any rate, yes. And has it can be good enough because some cases the symptoms are pretty bad. And we've known some people who've had some really bad symptoms.
Even for younger people.
Yeah.
Well, a friend of mine I went to high school with, and in her early 60s, like I am, she's had two negative tests. She's out in Arizona. And even though she's had 2 negative tests, her heart rate right now is about 50. She's got lung issues. She's never had any of this before. Other than her age, she really didn't have any of the factors that people were saying about being diabetic or overweight or whatever. So even though technically she never had it, although she did, And even now she's got a raft of doctors because she's over the virus, but the things that it's done to her body, she may never get over.
Yeah, I've heard that from more than one case where, you know, even younger people who get it, who get past it, the residuals they're damning.
It has a wide variety of impacts from death to pretty much being asymptomatic all the way through, though I don't think there's a lot of total asymptomatic cases out there. We have a friend who's very strongly suspects her daughter has it. Her daughter will not go get tested because it's all a hoax anyway. And she is suffering. What are you suffering from if you don't have it? But she won't get tested.
Yeah, I
was just saying, this is where I talk about learning. We have let ideology override reality, and I don't think that's a good idea. That's not good medicine.
Exactly. I've said it before. I'll say it again. We need to listen to the smart people. A lot of people say, well, in the fall, it's going to get a whole lot worse, and you think it's bad now, it's going to get worse in the fall, which maybe so, maybe not. We'll find out in the fall. But they say, well, we can't shut down the country again. I'd like to think that we can't shut down the country again. Here's a novel idea. Let's not shut down the country again. Let's social distance. Let's wear masks. And we can get through this thing until a vaccine is made. Why are so many people, they don't want to listen to that ideology?
This gets back to some of your tribalism and the unwillingness to compromise. We've developed into a society that has two speeds, full ahead and full reverse. We don't even have stop. We've just got full ahead and full reverse. And the idea that there are reasonable precautions you can take which will help get this thing under control without shutting everything down is lost on both sides. The people that are yelling, we've got to shut everything down, and then there are people who are yelling, we can't shut everything down, and there's nobody saying, but wait a minute, there's something we can do in between those two.
Well, there's that C word, that compromise word, and we don't shut it down. We social distance and we wear masks. We wash our hands. We do this and that, and in my opinion, that gets us to where we need to be. But it's a compromise, and compromise anymore is seen as a sign of weakness.
This morning I had a friend of mine send me a message, and it said, if COVID-19 is all over the place, how come we don't have U.S. representatives and senators who are dying of it? Now, we've had both who have had it.
Mm-hmm.
And I kicked this back, and I said, well, the Prime Minister of Britain, Boris Johnson, did not really believe in COVID.
Until he got it.
And then he got it, and he ended up in the ICU. And suddenly, 3 weeks later, when he was back on the job, he was a changed man to the point that, and granted, they have a different health system. They have a lot of things. But basically, he was made a believer of.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the problem, and I think this is an American thing, because I've not noticed it in people who are from other places. They do not understand how small this planet is. When you tell them that the diameter of the Earth is less than 3 times from Maine to San Diego, which it is, they're going, oh, you're just making that up. And that's the reason it's a pandemic. It's all over the planet. It's not just us.
Mm-hmm.
It's just us that are acting like idiots about it.
Well, and the whole thing, I mean, we've had pandemics before, but we've never had travel like we have now. Okay, that's the big thing. I mean, the first big pandemic that we read about was the Black Plague, and that came from Central Asia to Europe, and a lot of people died.
Third the population.
That's correct. But now we can get from. I mean, if the three of us decide we want to be in Asia tomorrow, we can buy a plane ticket and be there tomorrow. Well, maybe not because of the travel restrictions, but you know what I'm saying. You can get anywhere you need to in 32 hours, anywhere in the world. Okay, I've done that. So if you have a disease here, it's easy to take it from here to there. The first pandemic of our lifetime, I guess, not our lifetime, but the Spanish flu. And that was from the soldiers coming back from Spain back to the U.S. Well, the other way first.
Yeah.
It came from here to there.
It started here and it went with them to Europe. Yeah,
that's correct. But then it was spread there and then brought back and it was a young person's thing, which the soldiers were young. But you're right. It started here and went there, where it wasn't truly the Spanish flu. Should have been called the American flu, but that's another story for another day. Mm-hmm. You're right.
675,000 Americans died. I think it was 3 or 5 million in the world.
Now, you've probably heard the story of the tale of two cities, Philadelphia and St. Louis, during the Spanish flu. This was a case where Philadelphia just threw caution to the wind and did what they wanted. And St. Louis did an interesting thing. They said, you know what? Let's just stay at home for a while. Stay away from one another and wear masks when we go out in public. This was 100 years ago, 102 years ago, okay? That's what they did. And St. Louis had a death rate something like 10% of Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, we're sitting here. It's the beginning of July. I thought this was all going to be over by mid-April.
A lot of people did because that's what happens with the flu, right?
Well, but where I was wrong was people didn't listen. I mean, the incubation time of this thing is 2 weeks. We were in a lockdown and people were behaving themselves for 4 weeks. It should be gone. Mm-hmm. But people didn't behave themselves. Yeah. And I mean, we talk about it, and I will pull out just an interesting thing, which the people on things can't see, but there is Memorial Day. Right there.
That's things were pretty doggone good there.
And then came Memorial Day.
Party time.
We all
start of summer.
We all saw that picture from Osage Beach,
yeah.
And that's when that's when the lockdowns were all over and people started throwing caution to the wind. And our infection rate in this country is half again worse than it was at the peak when we went into the lockdown. You're absolutely right. We can do stuff. And one of the reasons we're here is we're trying to encourage people to do stuff. We can fix this, but it's not something somebody else can fix. It's something that each one of us has to fix.
And there's compromise and there's sacrifice. This whole poolside podcast thing to me has maybe been a blessing in disguise. I don't want to talk about the rain staying away because as soon as I talk about it, you know what's going to happen. But it's kind of cool to be out here. But we're 6 feet away. I mean, you and Joe are close together, but you live together anyway, your husband and wife, and so that's okay. But we're 6 feet away. We're outside. We're doing the smart thing, okay? But we can still have the Dopey podcast because we're doing it the right way.
And I want Joe to read her poem.
Okay.
Let's hear it. For those of you, I mean, those of you who listen to the podcast, you know Eugene and Joe. And Joe is, among 75 other things, she's also a poet. And a published poet, by the way. And she has a poetic pandemic phrase. Let's say it. Let's hear it.
The Shannon County first responders, who are some people I follow on Facebook.
And where is Shannon County?
Shannon County is in south central Missouri. It basically, 3/5 of the county is owned by the government. Another fifth of it is owned by the Pioneer Forest LAD Foundation, and the remaining fifth, actually, the whole 8,000 people who live in the county share the rest of it. Anyway, one of the gentlemen who's there is a fellow I know, and he put up a